All right, welcome back, everyone. I'm really excited to dive into this one with you today. We're looking at a truly fascinating, kind of mind blowing text, Rachel Cusk's 2001 memoir, A Life's Work, on becoming a mother. Now, look, if you're expecting a soothing, step by step parenting manual with pastel colors and soft lighting, you are definitely in for a surprise. What we're exploring today is a profound, entirely unapologetic literary excavation of motherhood's raw contradictions. Cusk wrote this to completely dismantle the myths we're also used to, digging deep into the intense personal upheavals that actually come with having a child. It's a book that sparked a massive conversation, and we're going to break down exactly what she says and why it matters so much.
Here's our roadmap for today. We're going to start by dismantling the maternal myth, then look at the physical metamorphosis, the relentless demands of early motherhood, the shift in identity and ambivalence, the resulting isolation, and finally, breaking the cultural silence. So, part 1, dismantling the maternal myth and moving beyond that romanticized narrative. Let's get right into it. At the very core of Cusk's memoir is this incredibly stark contrast. On one hand, you've got this sanitized, almost glowing cultural myth of maternal bliss, the version society just loves to project. But then, on the other hand, there's Cusk's visceral reality. Throughout the book, she literally strips away all those ingrained delusions. She's basically saying, hey, society gives us this picture-perfect image, but completely leaves out the pain, the mixed feelings, and the massive transformation that actually happens. It's a completely necessary reality check to get to the actual truth of her experience.
Okay, moving on to section 2, the physical metamorphosis, confronting mortality, identity, and inevitability.
Cusk actually frames those initial 40 weeks of pregnancy as a profound bodily metamorphosis. It's like your illusions of control are just entirely stripped away, and your body becomes, as she puts it, both a vessel and a battleground. She doesn't just describe pregnancy as sitting around waiting for a baby, right? It's a primal state. It really forces a confrontation with mortality. She even talks about her own childhood fears of childbirth being this violent thing, pointing out that our culture's absolute silence around maternal pain actually breeds so much more fear. You really lose that illusion of being the sole boss of your own body. And this loss of control, it builds up through 3 very distinct stages. First, you have the autonomous individual entering the hospital. Then you become the pregnant woman in labor. And finally, there's this completely irreversible transition to mother. Cusk describes childbirth as this massive threshold. I mean, yes, it's miraculous for sure, but it can also be deeply traumatic. She highlights how alienating the hospital environment can be. Where medical authority just completely takes over and strips women of their agency. It's literally an existential rupture. Your personal anonymity is gone forever, and this new, totally unchosen identity just takes the wheel. Think about this for a second. What metaphors of birth resonate with your own experiences, or maybe what you've observed in others? When you hear childbirth described not just as a routine medical event, but as an existential rupture or a loss of individual agency, how does that line up with what you've actually seen or lived through? It's a pretty powerful way to reframe something we talk about constantly, yet almost never in these terms. All right, section 3, the relentless demands, feeding, fatigue, and maternal servitude. Here, Cusk tackles the early postpartum period entirely head-on. She talks about breastfeeding, and let me tell you, she doesn't frame it as some effortless, natural bliss. Instead, it's a painful, exhausting ordeal that is just loaded with conflicting advice and heavy cultural guilt. She argues that sanctifying breastfeeding actually burdens women with completely unrealistic ideals. It creates this endless cycle of servitude that seriously chips away at your autonomy. And then you throw in what she describes as a hallucinatory state of sleep deprivation, where the line between day and night literally just collapses, and you're left in this surreal, perpetual exhaustion where time essentially stops existing. And this relentless schedule leads to a really fascinating, kind of tragic psychological effect, the guilt of rest. For a new mom, even just taking a quick nap can feel like a betrayal. Cusk observes that trying to reclaim even tiny fragments of your old self feels like you're somehow cheating on your new maternal devotion. It's a really striking point about the sheer, immense pressure mothers put on themselves, which is, of course, entirely fueled by society's expectations. Which really makes you wonder, right? How does sleep deprivation actually alter a person's sense of identity and time? Just imagine living in that perpetual state of exhaustion where even sleeping feels like a taboo. How could you possibly hold on to your former self when you literally don't have the basic biological rest needed to even think clearly? That takes us right into section 4, identity and ambivalence. Loving the child, but resenting the demands. This is where we hit the absolute paradox at the core of Cusk's memoir, the tension between martyrdom and tyranny. Society expects motherhood to be this completely selfless sacrifice, but the reality is that it's deeply intertwined with, well, oppressive responsibility. Cusk admits, and this is something that really unsettled a lot of readers back then, she completely loves her child, but she also strongly resents the absolute erosion of her autonomy and the total obliteration of her identity as a writer. It's a very complex, often highly taboo reality of feeling just completely consumed. So here's a question for you, pulling straight from Cusk's own reflections. How can ambivalence be acknowledged as a valid, authentic part of caregiving? Feeling torn or genuinely missing your old life doesn't mean you failed at loving your kid. By bringing this totally taboo honesty into the light, we have to ask ourselves, how do we actually make space for these very real, deeply complex emotions when we define what makes a good caregiver?
Moving on to Section 5, Isolation and Relationships. Navigating social invisibility and shifting bonds. It's no secret that a new baby completely rewires a mother's social circle and her marriage. Cusk points out that motherhood has a way of uncovering all these hidden inequities in domestic labor and emotional support, which can cause severe marital strain. But looking outside the home, there's this wild irony. Think about it. Maternal work is absolutely central to the survival of our species, right? Yet the mother herself often experiences this profound social invisibility. Throw in the diverging lived realities that strain friendships with people who don't have kids, and a mother can be left feeling incredibly isolated and completely unseen. And that brings us to our final section, Section 6, Breaking the Cultural Silence. Memoir as a Radical Act of Resistance.
In the final chapters of the book, Cusk really pans out. She takes a broader philosophical and literary view, exposing this incredibly profound cultural double bind. She points out a massive hypocrisy. Society venerates motherhood, treating it as something completely sacred, but at the exact same time, it strictly suppresses the darker, painful, and exhausting truths of the actual experience. Mothers are just caught in the middle of this. Cusk refusing to stay quiet, that's her direct challenge to these overly sanitized picture-perfect depictions. And honestly, that is exactly why this book has endured. By writing so candidly, Cusk breaks the silence, offering real solidarity to mothers who feel unseen. Look, the book was definitely controversial for its raw honesty when it came out, but it's absolutely not a text about failing at maternal love. It is a validating, truly radical piece of writing. By putting her messy, visceral reality down on paper, she gives a voice to the unspoken struggles of countless women who are navigating those exact same contradictions every single day.
Which leaves us with one final big question to chew on today. What structures could better support mothers in navigating this unromanticized, entirely authentic reality? If we agree with Cusk's premise that the reality of motherhood actually involves pain, ambivalence, and massive identity shifts, well, how do our society, our workplaces, and our communities need to evolve? We need to actively support that truth rather than just clinging to the myth. I really hope this explainer sparked some new ways of thinking about an age-old topic. Keep asking those big questions, keep learning, and I'll catch you in the next one.